everyone, pull up a chair and get comfy.
Oh, girl, have we got stories to tell you all. The Never Alone podcast is about to begin, and you don't want to miss a minute.
Well, welcome back. This is our second episode that we're excited about. It's our podcast entitled Never Alone, the Never Alone podcast, and it's based on a book that I wrote, as I mentioned in the first episode, entitled Never Alone. And it's a story of the importance of friendship and family and sticking together. And for my co-host, who is with me again, her name is Karen Hirth Whitty. Welcome back, Karen. It's great to have you again.
Hey, nice to see you again.
This is great. And so we're looking forward to our conversation today and conversations to come. We're talking a lot about, like I said, friendship and family. And Karen and I go way back to when she was 5, I was 8. And we literally grew up together like sisters. And here we are many, many years later as, parents and grandparents. And, just still doing this journey together, Karen. This is great. So we're going to kick this off, this episode, by Karen asking me some questions about my book and what made me write it. So go ahead, Karen. Go ahead and ask some questions.
Well, you kind of got my first question there. You just stated it. So I've been talking with my family, and we've been discussing the fact that this is really crazy that you did this and how cool it is. And I guess part of the first question I had was, when did you first get inspired to write the book, and how long did it actually take you to finish the book?
Anytime you write a book that's an autobiography, it's always this major journey, and it's never in a year. Maybe it could be for some people, it could be done in a year, but for me, it was a long process that I actually started when I was in my 20s. I'm now 66. And back then I wrote with a friend, and I was just learning to write back then. I was a good writer, but I needed a lot of training. And so I had a friend helping me, and we wrote the story, but I didn't like the way it came out, so we just kind of dumped it and put it on the back burner as I was raising my son, getting into life. At that time I was doing singing and songwriting, and so I got distracted. And so the book didn't come around again. It was always kind of in the back of my mind all those years, but, like I said, life takes over and you go in different directions. But anyway, back then, I remember thinking, okay, I'd like to write a book. I want to do an autobiography. But to tell you the truth, I hadn't had enough experiences yet. My life wasn't really to the point where I could share the things I needed to share about learning and growing and, the experiences I had had. So it wasn't until 2020, I think it was, we're in 2025, I started really considering doing that. And then I'm going to look at my book and see when this got published, because
that during COVID,
it was just right before COVID, actually. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Before
yeah, so
COVID.
I originally published the book in 2020. And when did COVID hit?
Oh, wow. Well, 2020.
It was around that time. It was just before COVID hit, because my grandson was also being born at that time, and just all the things that were taking place.
Okay.
So I had started the book just before the COVID hit. And when COVID hit, I thought, something, this is a really good time to write my autobiography. Initially, I got in touch with some publishing companies. I had a lot of different offers for it. And some were calling it a memoir, some were calling it an autobiography. But what I did was I just took my time, because we were all in, lockdown?
Yeah, nothing else to do.
And no one knew how long that was going to last. And guess what? Everybody else started writing books too, but whatever. So as I was writing the book, I'm thinking, okay, what do I want to write about? I know I want to write about my story, but what should my focus be? And so I started calling different friends, and I talked to my brother Alan and my husband and my son, and they all said, you know what, you're so good at bringing people together and friendships, why not center it on the importance of friendship and family and sticking together? Because we know that when that life comes at us, and it's during those times that we find our comfort in being together that way. So as I began to start writing it, I started with a publishing company. They took me on, and they offered me courses with coaching and people that were
Oh,
helping me
wow.
edit the book. I mean, I had a ton of help, and I ended up going to school to do it
Nice.
correctly. And
Yeah. I wondered
yeah,
about that.
and so I had to do research because I was now going to be talking about not just my story, but world history revolving around my own
Mm.
family's story, right? So I had to do it.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite
Yeah, and
parts.
so in the process of this,
Oh,
I
sorry.
was, thinking, okay, what kind of history do I want to talk about? Then I remembered, well, my mother did this during a major event. My father did that during a major event. Why not write about those and coordinate them together? I'll give you an example. My mother, back when she was in high school, she graduated in 1950. She was born in 1932. She had a whole class full of wonderful friends, that she just had a great high school life.
Mhm.
And, they really knew how to stick together back then. In fact, they stuck together until they all
Mm,
passed
nice.
away one by one. They lived in the same area. They grew up in Massachusetts, in Chelsea,
Mm.
Massachusetts, and they just always stuck together. But anyway, so it was 1950 that they graduated, and now remember, she had a whole bunch of classmates, right? So it was probably
Yeah.
1965, I'm thinking, around that time, roughly, when they began to hear about this man named Albert DeSalvo, who just happened to be the Boston Strangler. And so, and we have an episode coming up with a friend of mine's. Her mother and my mother were very close, and she'll be talking about that a little bit too. But when they all got together, they were like, "Oh my God, I sat next to him in homeroom," and they thought he was a little strange, but he didn't
Uh,
look like anything that was coming up. I mean, he was a Boston Strangler, and so I talk about that of history and how my mother experienced that. She went to school with him, and how shocking that was. And
yeah.
so then another
Wow.
example is my father grew up with Leonard Nimoy, the actor from Star Trek, the original Star Trek, series as Mr. Spock. They grew up in
Hmm.
the West End of Boston together. And my father's name was also Leonard, so that was kind of interesting. So I talk about the history of that in the book and how my father experienced that. I also talk about how my father was in the Korean War, and he was taken, captive as a prisoner of war for about 6 months, and it was very, very hard. He was captured by the Russians, and so that was a major historical event. And we talked about in the book, and my brother Alan helped me with some of the details. Where, let's see, it was then Senator Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, who later became president, as many people know. He was
Yep.
instrumental in my dad's rescue. He was very interested in the servicemen that were missing in action at that time. And he came to my grandmother's house. He was comforting her and kept writing her letters. We're still looking for him. We can't find him. Eventually, obviously, they found him. He was in rough shape, and then Senator Kennedy was instrumental in helping to get him rehabilitated along with other servicemen that were missing. So these are just some examples of what I wrote about. And originally, I wrote the book because I kind of wanted to just, I'm thinking, okay, why am I writing a book? I really thought of my family and I wanted to write like a history book for them so that my grandchildren one day would be
Yeah.
able to go back and look at this book and say, wow, this is what happened. Because someday I'm not going to be around. I won't be able to tell them stories verbally like what I heard growing up. So I felt that I wanted
Yeah.
to leave it to them. But what happened was, as the book started to come out, I did a book signing in the middle of COVID, and it was really hard because people showed up in masks, and
Funny.
we had to be very careful. I had to limit the number
Mm-hmm.
of people. We had to do it outside. People had to be away from each other, but we did it. And so we
Yeah.
did that, and that started the whole process. And before I knew it, the book really was catching on because it had so much about history that was the book was, being called fun. It was being called the book
Yeah.
that kind of teaches you about, not only history, but life lessons. And so it started catching on,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, okay.
Hmm.
And so what happened was it became not just a family book, but now it's really out there and people are benefiting from the knowledge that I received from writing this book. And how did I write the book? Well, I was able to write stories about my mother, my grandmother, and all of that because as a child, remember, Karen,
Yep.
you said it when we were younger. You said you're like a sponge soaking everything up. And I'm so glad I was because that's how I wrote the book. Otherwise, if I hadn't been so present and
Yeah.
listening to all the stories and all of us getting together and sharing those stories, my grandparents, my parents, my siblings, it actually is in this business of talking back and forth and listening that we attain all these memories. You talk about history and you're making
Yeah.
memories. So again, just to recap, the reason I originally wrote the book was for my family, but then it started to just catch on with other people, which also led me to an adaptation for a episodic series for television, which we just finished writing that. I have a co-writer that wrote that with me. Vincent
Nice.
Olmos wrote that with me, and we finished 10 episodes, and that's all prepared and ready to go. We're just waiting for the right timing for that. And so here we are. Did I answer your
Yeah.
question, I hope?
Wow. You answered a bunch of my questions, actually, more than one. So now we're going to skip ahead to a couple here. I'm like, okay, well, just stole my thunder. Great. No,
Sorry.
actually, I think it's all right. I'm like, okay, that was enough. Yeah, no, we're good. We're good. I did, we talked about, I was interested in like how you did your research, and I do know that a lot of it was stories you were told. And I believe you reached out to family and friends and asked them stories. I do love in the book that you talk about. I feel like there's a couple of things that you told in the book in that particular chapter, things that you probably didn't know as a kid and learned as you were doing your research. Can you give an example or one or two of
Well,
those?
one of the things that I did in the process of research is like, for example, I knew my brother Alan and his wife and two boys lived through the 1989 earthquake. But I didn't know the details because back
Mm,
then we didn't have cell
okay.
phones and we weren't able to hear details. All we knew was that it happened, it was devastating, people died, but then our family was okay. So what I did was I went back to
Yeah.
Alan and I said, "Okay, so can you give me the details of what happened? What did you experience?" And he went into major
Yeah.
details about from start to finish what it was like, everything from his, pool, kind of exploding over into his neighbor's yard and
Yeah.
the
Scary.
ground breaking up and, the hospital where his wife was having a baby in the middle of this whole earthquake. She had just, look at the timing of this one. She had just delivered, my nephew, and she had had a C-section, and
Yeah.
an hour later, she was brought back to her room, and an hour later the earthquake hit, and she happened to be holding him, and you know and the
Wow.
bassinet went flying out the window in the process of this. If she hadn't been holding him, and there was so many miraculous things that took place, but the point
Hmm.
is, I was able to interview him, and he was able to give me detail. And that's how you write a book. You write with detail,
Yeah.
and you write with as accurate as you can, because remember, you're hearing some of this secondhand. So is it 100% true? No, not necessarily. Some of you have to kind of
Never know.
elaborate a little bit.
Please excuse this brief interruption for a shameless commercial. Remember, you can get your own copy of Iris's book, Never Alone, at irisfsmith.com.
There was a part in the book that I think if I remember you talking about, there were some things you learned new, like your dad had probably had a couple of name changes. Really interesting to think about his journey, and I know you'll share that. And just curious if there was anything else that, I mean, not a surprise like in a bad way. I just mean something you just didn't really, was it must have been fun to learn new
Yeah, well,
information.
another one was I spoke to my Aunt Elaine during the process of writing the book. I interviewed her. I interviewed one of my neighbors from Revere, Massachusetts, from when I was very little. We
Hmm.
shared a house together. They lived upstairs from us. And the neighbor from
Yeah.
upstairs, her name was Carolyn Pivnik. She's in the book. She was sharing with me what it was like when President Kennedy was shot and the details of what
Oh,
happened because
wow.
she remembered very specifically where she was, what was going on, how did people react. And
Yeah.
so she gave me the details of what she recalled. And then my Aunt Elaine remember details, believe it or not, of when President Roosevelt, when she was very young. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
she was like 10
That's
years
neat.
old, I think she told me, when he passed away, and what that
Hmm.
was like, and what was the country, how did the country respond? How did people respond? So I got to hear some inside
Yeah.
information of some really major events in history right from the horse's mouth, so to speak, right from the people. And that's the best place to hear it,
Yeah.
you know. So those are
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
examples of, doing some, interviews and research. And then when people told me things, I had to go back and do my own research just to make sure that it matched what they said, right? And their memories of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that really the cool part about this as it gets going and what I've had, my mom and stuff is it really is enjoyable, the nostalgia, and that's been fun. And the other part that I love, which continues, is it really represents your humor, which you can see your humor
Yeah,
in the
that's
book, and I
important.
I greatly appreciate that you come through in that way. It is important. It's a big piece of who you are. Yeah, so I think that is really,
Hmm.
really cool. Like, so yeah, so it is interesting, this the stories, how you think you know one thing, but then it's just slightly different than what you realized as a kid. And then I think sometimes we imagine in our mind, we fantasize a little bit about how we think one way was, and then but you have this great opportunity where you were really exposed to both sides of your family at a
Yeah,
key time. I was thinking about it today, thinking about, geez, it's really kind of cool. We grew up in the 60s and the
yeah.
70s. It's kind of weird, but it's kind of cool. I know two is really more back there a bit, but then to listen to you talk about, like, I don't even think of the Boston Strangler, like, but oh my gosh, that was the 50s. Like, in my
Well,
mind,
it was
I want to make
actually,
him the
he
70s, and he
graduated
wasn't.
in 1950, so it was early in the early 1960s that he
Okay.
was carrying on, so to speak, and
Misbehaving.
yes, and
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
badly so. Anyway, he didn't get. I
Yeah.
don't think he got found out until it was like the mid to late 60s. You know, it was pretty
Wow.
incredible. And then,
Yeah.
my mother told me that
Yeah.
she also went to school with a guy that was on The Young and the Restless. His name was Jerry Rubenstein. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
cool.
She went to school with one.
Yeah. Didn't know that one. That's
She had a
hysterical.
lot of people that came out of her class that became very successful. One of them was my pediatrician, who we didn't really appreciate because she had me go to him because she knew him, and he was the one that misdiagnosed my
Yep.
burst appendix that almost killed me.
Um,
And I can
mm,
remember when I came out of
yeah.
my coma, I can remember him being by my bed, literally crying because he felt so terrible because he was close with my mother.
Yeah.
And my mother,
Oh,
in
sure.
in
Yeah.
my mother could have sued him because it really affected the rest of my life, and it was such an extreme thing. But she couldn't because it was her friend. She knew he meant no harm. He didn't, and I lived, and that was enough for my parents, and that was showing their integrity.
Yeah, sure.
That was showing their
Sure.
integrity. Look, my daughter is alive. We've prayed,
Yeah.
and she's okay. I've had a lot of health issues as a result, but she did not want to sue him because the poor man was crying, you know. So you have to have
Yeah. Yeah.
that love for people and that grace that you give to other people when they make mistakes. He did not mean any harm. He did not do it on
Yeah.
purpose. He was not arrogant. He just made a big mistake.
Yeah.
And but I'm here. I am late.
Well,
I'm here now, right?
I was gonna say, this is, I think, the testament to the story too, is you're gonna share these things and people have read them or will hear about them, but perseverance, family support. This is a huge thing about what the crux of this book is for you, and I know that. And I think it's really inspiring to make us look at our own families and yeah, it's been really, really neat. And I think maybe you could share a little bit of what has come out of your. It's been a real blessing, I'm sure, to write this book. You've met so many new people along the way. There's so much to share, so much to come up in the future. I know you keep talking, we're going to possibly have people on, maybe your brother will be on, and there's going to be so much to share and talk about that I think it's going to be really, really fun for a lot of people to listen to. Mostly us, but yeah. So,
Aaron,
but we're having fun, so
like it
that's
says in the
okay.
beginning, and you don't want to miss a minute.
Which is hysterical because I swear it sounds like me, but
It
probably doesn't, so
does.
you know. But yeah, don't miss it.
And
That's
just
it.
for our
Oh
viewers'
my
information,
gosh.
just for our
Um,
viewers' information, you're the poodle.
yep. Yes. Thank you. Just glad you know. My straight bone, straight hair here, but I'm the poodle. So that's too funny. Yeah. And for people who don't know, Iris's husband is quite an amazing, loving support, which you'll hear more about him. And he's very talented, and he kind of fascinates me all the time. He's behind the scenes, and what he's just really quite talented putting things
Yeah,
together. So you're
yeah,
very
he really
lucky.
is. He's very good with technology. We do make a good team because I'm the one that does the production, he does the
Yep.
technology, you're the co-host. I mean, it just all comes together somehow, you know? When you have many
Yeah.
hands,
No, it's a nice
I always
combination.
said to my son, many
Mm.
hands
Make
make
work
light
light.
work, right?
Yep, yep. Where's that come from?
Oh, 100
I don't
years
even know.
ago.
Have to look
I
that one
don't
up.
know.
Yeah, I bet. That's wild. So very neat. No, I mean, I think this is just a great beginning, and I know this is only just begun. It'll be really hard for me not to run ahead and talk about all the book. So we will do our best to kind of take it a chapter at a time, but also knowing that we're going to branch into other conversations that we hope will be touching people in the now, and that give them the opportunity to look back at their lives and their families, maybe inspire them to make some connections that they would like to have in some details, but mostly just really spending time together with friends and making sure people know how important it is to
That's
not be
right.
alone.
That's right. Because as I've said before, life happens, good or bad or different. My
Mm,
mother used to say,
yeah,
how did my mother
yeah,
used to put it? I'm trying to remember. She'd say, good, bad, or indifferent, we have to get through this. And the way that we get through this is we stick together. That's
yeah,
where I got some of this from, is my mother. She was very much into, so not only socialization and having a good time with her friends, but supporting
yeah.
each other. My mother felt when somebody went through something, especially children, she felt for them so deeply.
Unit.
And I find myself doing the same thing every
Mm,
time I hear about a child suffering. I can't take
yeah,
it. It's like, oh God, it's not fair. They're just so little, you
right.
know. And it's bad enough
Hmm.
when it happens
Yeah,
when you're an adult, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
But I wanted to
yeah.
tell you one more
What
thing.
what what was it?
When I had my burst
Oh, sure.
appendix, and I was able to share about that in the book, you know how I did that? I was in a coma, so I didn't remember any
Yeah,
of this. I relied on what my mother told
mom.
me and my grandmother told me, and I sat and I listened to what they told me about my own experience because I was out for a whole month. I was not aware. And they
Sure.
told me
Yeah.
the things that were happening
Yep.
during that time, and then afterward with my recovery and what was that all about? So that's where I got my own story from, was from
Yeah.
others, because I didn't have any memory of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the cool thing is you start back to generationally, and then you bring it to your parents. And I do remember your mom being one capable
Yes.
lady. And I think it is interesting to me that her, when you talk about her, the view on life, I don't think I knew that at the time, that she was really, I know she was strong, but I don't think I realized how strong
Yeah.
she was,
Oh,
Iris.
she was very strong. Well, you know, she was Russian. She was 100% Russian. And boy, she just took the bull by the horns, and
Yeah.
she was, my father used to say to me, your mother's going to get life before it gets her.
Yeah. Well, that's a funny one. I
Yeah,
never
yeah,
heard
she
that
just was
before.
not going to let life
Oh,
get
wow.
her.
Yeah.
Her message
Yeah.
to me was always this. You know, when you have a friend, be a very good friend. You stay close to them. You be loyal. I learned so many life lessons from
Mm,
her. She said, but if they give you a hard time or if they turn on you, walk away. Do not take it. She said it in
yeah.
stronger terms, but I don't want to say that on the on the podcast.
Wow. Yeah, well, she encouraged you to be,
Have boundaries.
I think that's fascinating. She encouraged you to boundaries, but to have self-perseverance. I think sometimes people don't realize it's okay to do the self-preservation and to protect yourself as a person. And she wanted you, yeah, to know that you were worth that, which I think is really
Well, she
amazing.
wanted me to also learn to be a loyal person, to be kind to others, to be helpful
Mm,
to others. We're
yeah.
starting to teach my granddaughter and grandson the same thing. Be kind, be loyal, but don't let
Yeah.
people suck you dry,
Right.
so to speak. We have to have balance, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. Balance and boundaries. Boundaries aren't a bad thing. They're a good thing, and it's probably like a topic we've had over the last 20 years. So thinking that your mom knew all about that way back then. She was one
Yes,
smart
she
lady.
was, and I miss her dearly. In my book, I entitled the chapter where I dedicated the whole chapter to her, and I
Yeah,
entitled it "Saying Goodbye to My Best Friend" because I'll tell you, if a mother
yeah,
is like that, and I'm sure you've been the same way, and I've been that way, you know,
yeah.
there's nothing like a loyal, loving mother who's always there, who would absolutely die for you, and that's how
Hmm.
my mother was. She loved her children
Yeah,
that much that she would
yeah,
have died for us, you know.
hmm, yeah. No, we're both very blessed. I don't know what it is like for women who haven't had my mom. My sister will say the same. Like our mom's one of our best friends. Best friends, and having that kind of a relationship is really quite a
Yeah, well, and
blessing.
I can understand because I was around your mother a lot, and for a while there, she was my best friend too. Yeah,
I
remember
know.
the cup of the
I
cup
know. I know.
the
Go
cup of
figure.
tea I used to sleep over your house, and she would come up with her
Yes.
cup of tea and want to talk to me, make sure I was
Hmm.
okay, and
Yes, I know. And I remember it was funny because you got more conversation than I got, so that's all right. So people will learn. There's a little bit of an age difference, not a lot, 3 years. And I was the oldest in my family, and Iris was
third,
the
yeah.
third. So she got to be my big sister, and I got to have a big sister. But I do remember, like, why was my mother having tea with her? It's like, I look back now, I think I was probably oblivious. I'm going, wow, I never had tea. So kind of funny.
Till this day, I love tea, you
Hmm.
know.
Oh, that's so funny. And I don't. So no, I don't dislike it. I'm teasing, but that is kind of cute and
Yeah.
funny. And we do have some really great memories of being around each
Well,
other's
when my mother
houses.
used to visit me after my son went off to college, she used to come up and visit me and she'd go through my cabinets. And she went through one of my cabinets and I had so much tea in there and so many different kinds. She goes, Iris, you have
Oh, isn't
tea
that funny?
to pee
Hmm.
with, to poop with. She goes, I've never seen so much tea in my whole
Yeah,
life. She goes, what are you
yeah.
going to do with all the tea?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, you would love my daughter-in-law. My daughter, I have my youngest is Kyle, and he married a gal named Megan, and she, for her bridal shower, they did a blindfolded tea tasting, and she nailed every one. It was the most funniest thing I'd ever seen. She's so cute, but she's obsessed with tea. So my mom and her have that in common, which
Well,
is
your mother,
nice.
I
And now
think that
you.
your mother just kind of passed it on to everybody with the tea.
I know. Coffee wasn't a thing then, was it?
Well,
I guess
yes.
coffee wouldn't have been as much of a thing
But
back
you know
then, was it?
something, when people, you know how today
Huh.
people get together and they have glasses of wine together? I mean, the culture changes from every generation to
Yeah.
generation. Well, back then, people often got
Yeah.
together and it was
It
always
was tea.
tea. Every time it was tea. I remember going to my mother's
Excuse me.
house. Everybody had it was tea all over the
Yep.
table, tea and cookies.
Tea.
Very few
Yeah.
people had coffee together.
You
It was
know.
more tea. I mean, obviously people did,
Yep.
but there was a lot of tea going on.
Yep. Ah, that's so funny. I think there's some decorum in it and something nice and
Yeah.
traditional about it. And it is too bad that we don't have that all the time. But yeah, you're right. Everything
Well,
evolves,
back in
doesn't
the
it?
1930s, they came out with a song about it. Do you remember the song "Tea for Two and Two for Tea"? Yes,
No.
yeah,
Oh
my
yeah.
aunt,
Okay.
my
Do,
aunt,
do, do, do
my
for
aunt
tea.
loved tea so much, and this is my aunt that had developmental disabilities. She would pour a cup of tea for me, and she'd go,
Mm-hmm.
"Iris, tea for two and two for tea," and she would sing it to me, and as a little kid, I'm going, whatever.
I love it.
But they came
Yeah.
out with
Not again.
That's
Not
how
again.
popular tea was back then. They actually had a song about it, and it was quite interesting, and it was fun. It was
Mm-hmm.
part of the culture. So,
Neat. Yeah.
but boy,
Yeah.
when I go to a Chinese restaurant,
Wow.
I
Oh,
always
that's
order
great.
tea.
You always order tea? I know. Remember in the day they used to just give it to you? They bring the tea
Yeah,
over to start, and I think they still do in a lot of places. But I knew, yes, and that's in that story you talk about Sharon, yeah,
yeah,
Four Corners,
yeah.
Bob's
Oh yeah.
Corner, good Chinese food. Yep,
And then Papa
yep.
Gino's
That's
pizza.
so
Remember
funny.
that?
I love it. Papagenos was there, yeah, and then you're gonna get into Town Spa. We have a lot
Oh
of stuff
yeah.
to talk about
Town
that
Spa.
people will recognize. from the area anyways. Town Spa was our favorite. We could get in
That
trouble
was
for that one.
over in
But
the next
again,
town.
you had a gluten and
I
celiac.
know, no wonder. I was loaded
So
with
yeah,
I
you
was
poor
loaded with
tummy.
psoriasis from the celiac. I didn't know what was wrong with me.
I don't remember
Oh
that.
yeah,
That's
I was
funny.
pretty sick.
Yikes. Not funny. You
Yeah.
know what I mean. Yeah, that's too
But
bad.
anyway,
I know you've done a good.
but anyhow, so did you have any other questions? Because we're getting ready to wrap up for this particular episode.
No, I think you kind of hit everything I had. Yeah, you did a great job. You kind of nailed everything. I think that really is a good, gives a little bit of a foundation of how and why you started and where the book it sort of has gone, and they'll get to hear more about where it's
Yeah.
going.
So we're so glad you joined us today. Thank you for viewing this with us and listening and sharing. And we hope that
Thank you.
each time that you get together with us, we hope you learn something and are encouraged in some way by our stories. Because our stories are not unique because everybody goes through something. And so many of you will view this and say, oh, I
Yep.
remember that, and I can relate to that. And hopefully that's the case. But we want to thank you for joining us. And until our next episode, which will be episode number 3, we will look forward to having you view with us. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
I look forward
Bye.
to it. Bye bye.
Wow, that was awesome, wasn't it?
I know those stories were really something. Hey, thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you next time when we share more stories from Iris's book, Never Alone.
Order your copy of Never Alone at irisfsmith.com today.